the Chancellor's State of the CSU Address. The State of the CSU has traditionally been delivered in January. This year, because of the transition between Chancellors White and Castro occurring at the height of the pandemic, we delayed the State of the CSU to coincide with the start of another year, the academic year, a wonderfully appropriate time to hear Chancellor Castro's reflections on the state of the California State University. So, without any further delay, it is my honor and great pleasure to announce the first item in open session, the 2021 State of the CSU Address. Chancellor Castro.
Thank you, Chair Kimball, and good morning to every member of the extended California State University family watching today. This morning, it is my great honor and privilege to report to you on the state of the CSU, continuing a tradition started by my predecessor, Chancellor Emeritus Tim White, in 2014. Chancellor Emeritus White gave the last State of the CSU address on January 28, 2020. In an emotional and inspired speech, he spoke of a university on a steady ascent as he reflected on his distinguished 7-year tenure. He never expected that tenure to stretch to 8 years as it did when he so selflessly delayed his retirement, extending his service to guide the CSU through the first 10 months of the pandemic. On that day, January 28, 2020, the headlines were dominated by stories of then President Trump's first impeachment trial, and the state and nation were still reeling at the tragic death of Kobe Bryant, his daughter Gianna, and 7 others just 2 days before. There was another news story that had been rising in prominence since the middle of that month. A SARS-like novel coronavirus had killed more than 100 people, and there was evidence that it had spread to 17 countries. There were 5 known cases in the United States. The now former CDC director gave a news briefing at about the same time Chancellor White was speaking. The director reassured the nation that there was no evidence of community spread in the US, but cautioned that the coming weeks were likely to bring new cases, including, and I quote, the possibility of person-to-person transmission. Indeed, we and the entire nation were standing unaware at the edge of a precipice. In the matter of a few short weeks, our world would be turned upside down. That SARS-like novel coronavirus has since exploded into the most devastating pandemic in more than a century, one that's wrought global suffering on a massive and heartbreaking scale. To put it in chilling perspective, infections totaled 4,600 worldwide that January day in 2020, and 131 individuals had been killed by COVID-19. Today, there have been more than 224 million confirmed cases, and more than 4.6 million people have lost their lives worldwide. This public health crisis has disrupted our lives in previously unimaginable ways. It's brought about great economic uncertainty, and it, like so many hardships, has disproportionately impacted the most vulnerable among us. Compounding this tragedy over the past year and a half have been horrific acts of injustice, violence, and hatred. Our nation continues to be deeply and bitterly divided. Many of our most sacred and presumed stable democratic institutions have been figuratively and unthinkably, literally attacked, and some remain under threat to this day. but the CSU continues to thrive. Thanks to the courage, resilience, and resolve of our talented and diverse students, the ingenuity and adaptability of our faculty and staff, the support and partnership of our elected officials in Sacramento and Washington, D.C., and our collective belief in and focus on our mission and core values. And today, thanks in large part to the availability of multiple safe and effective vaccines, we are emerging from the pandemic. Because of a variety of factors, including vaccine hesitancy and the concurrent emergence of the Delta variant, our return to relative normalcy has been and will continue to be in fits and starts. But that return is inevitable, and it is cause for great relief and great joy. So we find ourselves at a unique moment in time, slowly emerging from one of the darkest moments in our nation's recent history. Certainly one of the most challenging times in the CSU's history. The pandemic may not be through with us quite yet, and we can't let our guard down, but we can begin to fix our eyes on the future. What does that future look like? At our January meeting in my first board report, I spoke with optimism that the CSU, as the nation's largest, most diverse, and most consequential university, can serve as an inflection point, one that will lead a turn towards science, healing, reconciliation, recovery, and prosperity. I continue to wholeheartedly believe that today. And I also believe that as painful, as tragic, and as difficult as they've been, the past 18 months have illuminated the path forward. My message today, let's listen to, let's honor the voices of the pandemic. To ignore them is to compound the tragedy. So let's be inspired by them. Let's heed their lessons as we reimagine an even more vital California State University. What are those lessons? First, I believe that the past 18 months have reminded us to be flexible and bold. What better example than our massive pivot to online instruction in the early days of the pandemic? In a span of approximately 2 weeks, we transitioned 80,000 courses to virtual modalities, and as a result, transitioned from a university in which online instruction had been a relatively small percentage of our academic programming to the nation's largest online institution. And our students excelled. Success measures for students from all backgrounds continued at record highs. Our latest data indicate that almost 133,000 students earned degrees in 2020, 2021, an all-time high. And as reflected in the recently released rankings from Washington Monthly, the CSU continues to be the nation's most powerful driver of socioeconomic mobility, with a combination of academic excellence and affordability that makes a Cal State degree one of the great values in higher education. Of course, when I say flexible and bold, I'm not suggesting that we be reckless. We will always use data and sound judgment to inform our decision-making. But let's put everything on the table and be innovative in meeting our students and our state's needs. For instance, this summer, our Flexible Course Experience Institute engaged faculty and staff from across the CSU to explore ways to offer courses in 3 modes simultaneously: face-to-face, virtual synchronous, and virtual asynchronous, with students able to choose the modality that best suits their needs and preferred learning style. Recognizing that learning happens in many different settings, professional and continuing education teams from across the university are redoubling efforts to award credit for prior learning, bringing greater access and the lifelong benefits of a Cal State education to veterans, adult learners, and other non-traditional students. In fact, you'll be hearing more about these efforts a bit later on in this meeting. And of course, Humboldt is poised to become Northern California's polytechnic institution, providing access to high-demand academic programs in the STEM fields, while helping the state, and more specifically, the North Coast, meet growing workforce needs. Bold indeed. Second, I believe we are called to be even more technology focused. That means continuing to refine and expand the great wealth of virtual instruction and support strategies that have proven so effective during the pandemic, and using them to enrich the student learning and discovery experience moving forward. Our campuses have been remarkably innovative in this regard. For example, Pomona, San Marcos, East Bay, Northridge, Channel Islands, Sonoma, Dominguez Hills, and Humboldt have been national leaders in the use of chatbots to advance equity, making strategic and timely interventions to help students, especially students of color and first generation and low income students, stay in school and on track, and providing unexpected sources of connection and support during times of isolation and loneliness. Virtual advisement has been extraordinarily successful, with appointment attendance nearing 100% at many campuses. It's been especially helpful for students with jobs and families to juggle, who can meet with their advisors wherever the student may be. Another great example of the CSU meeting our students where they are. Academic, cultural, or social events now have even greater reach and impact. As a timely example, Trustee Wenda Fong has worked with student, faculty, and staff leaders at Sac State to hold an event this Friday to make APETA students aware of emerging opportunities in the news, media, entertainment, and performing arts fields. Traditionally, this event would have been available only to those on or around the Sac State campus. Presented virtually, the event will now be available to all 23 campuses, as well as other colleges, universities, and high schools from every corner of our state and from coast to coast. In fact, its reach will extend to Southeast Asia with registrants from India and Bangladesh. Of course, the increased integration of technology can also exacerbate inequities if steps aren't taken to bridge the digital divide. Currently rolling out at 8 campuses, the first phase of the C Success Initiative is making available free of charge a new iPad Air, Apple Pencil, and Apple Smart Keyboard Folio to every incoming first year and transfer student. And it's proving to be extremely well received by our students. Demand is high, and we will distribute new, high quality, reliable mobile computing equipment to up to 35,000 students. I'm confident that it will be a game changer in terms of student success. And I look forward to future phases and the day coming soon when technology will be an essential and invaluable tool and not a barrier for every CSU student. The voices of the pandemic implore us to be an even more compassionate university. This has been powerfully brought home to me during my tour of our 23 campuses. I've visited 8 so far, including my first in-person visit at the Long Beach campus 2 weeks ago. And I've recounted highlights during my board reports. One highlight bears repeating. During each visit, I've had the pleasure of spending time with students. And every time I'm reminded just how much our students have gotten through as they've continued to work toward their degrees during extraordinarily challenging circumstances. The loss of family and friends, the loss of jobs, the loss of homes, and occasionally the loss of hope. And when we meet, I always make a point of asking them what I, as chancellor, can do to better serve them. Their responses have been heart-wrenching in their simplicity. They want understanding, empathy, a little flexibility. They want compassion. We will come through for those students and their peers because compassion is part of our DNA. Examples are everywhere, like the mental health first aid training program led by 3 CSU faculty members in partnership with Dr. Emily Magruder, CSU Director of Innovative Teaching and Future Faculty Development, Dr. Bonnie Gazior of Cal State Long Beach, Dr. Darcy Strother of CSU San Marcos, and Salish Maharjan of Cal State San Bernardino prepare faculty across the CSU to be certified mental health first responders, recognizing and appropriately caring for students in mental or emotional distress until they can be connected to professional help. So far, 8 cohorts have been conducted and more than 175 faculty have been certified. Registration always fills within hours of opening. A credit to Drs. Gazior and Strother and Professor Maharjan, and to our caring and compassionate faculty. Other programs developed to address the exigencies of the past 18 months are wonderful and moving examples of our university's heart, serving as inspiration for how we might care for our students and communities moving forward. You'll find these stories in Humboldt, where the Inclusivity Project, part of the Northern California Small Business Development Center, aims to secure $100 million for 1,000 Black-owned businesses. And they stretch to San Diego, 800 miles south, where nearly 3,000 San Diego State students, faculty, and staff have pledged to take action to contribute to lasting change in support of the campus's Black and APITA communities, receiving resources to help them to be an ally, an active supporter of these students. At Fullerton, the Gender Affirming Closet provides a safe space for transgender and gender nonconforming students to find clothing free of charge and free of fear. Cal State LA, like so many of our campuses, has been innovative throughout the pandemic in caring for food insecure students, launching a free curbside food pickup service as part of its food pantry program. And it has collaborated with community partners to distribute meals to thousands of families in need in East, Southeast, and South Los Angeles. Similarly, Fresno State Student Cupboard has long served as a national model in addressing student food insecurity, and a recent transformational gift by the Amendola family will endow this vital work for the long term. Really happy about that one. I also want to recognize the Rapid Rehousing Program, which has so effectively provided immediate housing options for students who found themselves displaced during the pandemic. Students like Chico State's Brian Ferncase, Brian, whose mother died when he was a teenager and whose father has struggled with addiction, was determined to make it on his own, living out of his van while pursuing his degree in psychology, politely declining case manager Emma Jewett's offers of help. I didn't feel ready yet, Brian says. Then one day he was. Says Brian, it was the middle of the coronavirus, summer and 110 degrees, and my van broke down. I was ready. Brian called Jewett and was in a house the next day. Today, he lives in a studio apartment, working a job on the university farm, one of 125 students for whom Chico State has found housing. Well done, Brian. Well done, Emma. And well done, Chico. Finally, the voices of the pandemic cry out to us to be more inclusive and equitable. Two of my highest priorities as your chancellor. It is extraordinarily important to me that our students see themselves in our campus communities and feel a sense of belonging, that they feel seen, heard, and valued in their surroundings. We've made steady progress in this regard. Today, 45% of CSU staff identify as a person of color, as compared to roughly 1/3 a decade ago. For instructional faculty, the percentage is 35%, and significantly, nearly half, 47% of our most recent tenure track cohort identify as persons of color. Of course, we must do more. We must continue to employ creative strategies to ensure that our diverse students are reflected by and connected with faculty and staff who authentically understand their lived experiences because they've walked a similar path and are uniquely able to inspire the very best in our talented students. Regarding equity, many of you may know that one of my first acts as chancellor was to form an advisory committee to develop recommendations for strategic and tailored solutions to completely eliminate equity gaps that exist in graduation rates between students of color, first-generation students, and low-income students and their peers. Those recommendations were presented at our last meeting, and today you'll hear more details. I believe they show great promise. We've already begun work to implement those recommendations with solutions and interventions precisely tailored so that their benefit reaches those who need it the most. This effort will require a renewed commitment to transparency and accountability, frank and honest discussions about what's working and where we are falling short, with earnest collaboration and data sharing between and among campuses so we can all benefit from those who are succeeding. The recently announced Global Hispanic Serving Institution Equity Innovation Hub, located on CSUN's campus, will help us advance equity in STEM education, not just across the CSU, and it will be across the CSU, but on a national scale. The hub's work will transform HSI's approach to STEM education, increasing student success and inspiring and equipping Latinx and other diverse students with skills and pathways for successful careers in these high-demand fields. Established with the visionary support and partnership of the state of California and Apple, it will also serve as a shining beacon of how the private sector can join the CSU to support our state's and nation's future leaders. There are stirring examples of successful strategies that are advancing equity on every one of our 23 campuses. Myriad innovations in teaching and learning advisement, and analytics. But I'm not going to focus on those this morning. Every initiative, every innovation is important, essential, mission critical. But this morning, I ask that we reflect upon a reality that we all understand, but sometimes we need to be reminded of. Initiatives to advance equity are truly meaningful, not because of any success metric. They are meaningful in the lives they touch, in potential realized. Every one of these stories is a success story. This morning, I've invited a special guest to share his story with you. It's my honor now to welcome to the podium Cal Poly alumnus, Luis Dominguez. Luis. Welcome.
Thank you, Chancellor Castro. I never thought I'd work at a place like NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I never thought I'd help put 2 one-ton robots and a helicopter on Mars. I never thought I'd work building a satellite to investigate the theoretical core of a planetesimal in the asteroid belt. And I never thought I would be invited to join the Chancellor of the CSU at his State of the CSU address. But here I am before you today, having done that and looking to do a whole lot more. I'm a first-generation college student and the proud child of immigrants. My mother is from Mexico and my father is from Honduras. I grew up in Los Angeles, born and raised in the West Adams and Crenshaw areas of South LA, but I never even knew JPL existed. That was until I started looking for an internship in my 3rd year of college at Cal Poly Pomona. I had to look up JPL as I was being interviewed, and I quickly realized it was a very cool place. And in November of 2007, I started as an academic part-time employee at JPL. And it has been fantastic ever since. Why had I never heard of this place? Why weren't more children exposed to places like JPL? So while I love engineering, science, math, programming, and pretty much any other nerdy topic you can think of, my greatest passion in life, not unlike Chancellor Castro and many of you, has been inspiring children from socioeconomically disenfranchised areas of Los Angeles and wherever else they'll let me talk, to strive to live their lives with courage, curiosity, tenacity, and a healthy dose of altruism, because those are the tenets that got me to where I'm at today. So let's start with curiosity. I was always a very curious child, and my parents did a great job of fostering my curious inclinations, well, as best they could, given the fiscal limits of our household. But nothing satiated the appetite of a know-it-all kid like me more than almanacs. I would eagerly await my mom to return from the thrift store, bringing me a new almanac that was often 2 to 3 years old, in the best of cases. And even though I always felt like I was behind the curve, since the almanacs were so old, I loved learning all those random useless facts. Then one day in music class, one of my friends brought a book on airplanes, and I was hooked. SR-71 Blackbird, A-10 Warthog, P-51 Mustang, F-117 Nighthawk, biplanes, air screws, every plane, every model, every style was remarkable. So I went home, turned on the net zero internet, closed all the advertisements, and as quickly as that 56K could get that information, I looked up how I could work on airplanes that day. And I discovered that there were these people called aerospace engineers who design and build airplanes. So I was set. I was going to be an aerospace engineer. I would be an airplane whisperer like my dad, the mechanic, who was the car whisperer. However, being curious is not enough. I had to work hard and learn to embrace failure. I had to learn to be tenacious because I didn't do too well in middle school. I failed my classes for the first time and just had a real tough time. Maybe it was skipping 5th grade, or maybe it was adjusting to a magnet program that was a bit more rigorous. But once I realized I wanted to be an engineer, an aerospace engineer, I knew I had to turn it around in high school. So I adjusted, changed some of my behaviors, and went from barely making it out of middle school to maintaining a 4.0 GPA in my first year at high school, at Westchester High School, and staying pretty close to that average all the way through graduation at Cal Poly Pomona. It took hard work to turn it around, but I understood what it meant to work hard. I saw it in my parents every day. And I learned to bound my failures by taking risks and making mistakes, because you never learn anything you didn't already know from success. Failure provides the opportunity to learn and adjust. You have to be tenacious and embrace failure. And I didn't get where I'm at today on my own. I had many informal mentors and people who guided me along the way. A supportive family who always pushed for getting more educated, and parents who showed me to be compassionate and empathetic. Help people and they will help you. Well, not always, but I found generally, people remember if you give the effort and show you care. And though they might not recognize that you may need their help today, maybe even that day, and though they may not be able to help you that day, tomorrow, next week, year, or decade, the more of those people you cultivate around you, the more it helps everyone. I remembered all the special guests that would sometimes come by and talk to students about future opportunities. I mean, I knew what I wanted to do, and many times my attention would wander, but sometimes it changed my life trajectory. Like when a professor from Cal State LA came and spoke at my high school and convinced me to study mechanical engineering. So I had to pay it forward. And it's why I'm passionate about speaking to kids and getting them to dream big. But it took me a long time to build courage. It didn't help that I'm a naturally big, nerdy introvert. But once I started working full-time at JPL and had put one rover on Mars, I recognized the bully pulpit that had been afforded to me. I mean, I was working at NASA. I had the opportunity to change kids' lives, kids like me. The problem was I was a terrible public speaker. Shaky, jittery, and just not comfortable in the limelight. So I joined a Toastmasters club, built up the courage, and learned to speak. Also, I could help. Courage, curiosity, tenacity, and a healthy dose of altruism got me to where I'm at today. But I'm not special. And above all, this is what I hope you will take away from my remarks this morning. Just like this universe, every human being is filled with infinite capabilities and infinite possibilities, with genius. No matter their background, no matter their zip code, no matter their financial circumstance, it is incumbent upon us as leaders to find that genius, to stoke it, and let it shine. Because at the end of the day, genius is everywhere. Thank you.
Wow, Luis, thank you. And let me say what you've undoubtedly heard many times before. You are an inspiration. Genius is everywhere. And before I close my remarks, I want those words to hang in the air for just a few seconds more. Genius is everywhere. I also want to say congratulations to Luis and Claudia. They're engaged to be married. And my wife, Mary, will appreciate this, that they met at McDonald's and we met at Burger King. So wish you the very best. Ladies and gentlemen, the state of the CSU is strong. It is resilient. It is resolute. The state of the CSU is poised to honor the voices of the pandemic, to be even more courageous and bold, more technology focused, to show even greater compassion, and to answer the call to be an even more accessible, inclusive, and equitable institution so that genius can thrive, whether in spectacular fashion like a career in aerospace or in careers every bit as vital as teachers, caregivers, business leaders, engineers, or public servants, as we transform the lives of our current and future students, and as a global model for post-pandemic higher education, we lead our state and nation to their brightest future. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you, Chancellor Castro.